Hey folks, Rob here, bringing another tutorial. This one's going to be on SASL, Solitaire Advanced Squad Leader. We're going to cover a couple things like an article from Robert Delwood written probably 2 decades ago, just prior to second edition SASL coming out, and then he revised it after in a journal number 2. And it's called SASL is not ASL, and we're also going to talk about some basic concepts driven by that article and a couple of other things that are going to lay the foundation for a series of videos I'm going to produce where we deep dive into Chapter S. So if you're interested in solitaire play, or even if you're not, hopefully some of this might be useful to you, and hopefully you'll give it a try. And if you have been a previous player and you picked up a dislike for the rules, shall we say, maybe this will give you a little more drive to try it again uh, based on certain mindsets. So we have a lot to cover. Let's get into it. So when I first saw this production forecast from Multiman Publishing, it was posted on a couple of forums, and I saw working on a reprint of Solitaire ASL, and I was giddy. I do not have second edition Solitaire. I do have first, and I end up borrowing my friend's second edition whenever I want to give it a crack. So I'm really looking forward to this being released. Now it says 2023. You can see that we're going to be at the tail end of November when this comes out. And based on the fact that I was playtesting a couple of missions, which I think might be included, obviously it's not ready for publication just yet. So hopefully 2024 it'll be a reality, and then we can get our hot little hands on it. I'm not going to spend the ridiculous amount of dollars that some resellers are offering for it. You know, north of $200. It's just ridiculous, especially if it's in a Ziploc bag. Um, yeah, just crazy. I'm not going to do that. I'll wait for the print version to come out. So what's driven this video is a couple things, and one of them is this article by Robert Delwood. Again, he wrote this up originally prior to second edition, and I believe it was revised afterwards, and it was included in the ASL Journal number 2. SASL is not ASL, where he goes into a good description of what the game actually is and how some people have probably assumed, I think, erroneously, uh, what it is not. And we're going to cover some of those assumptions and what people thought about them. Hopefully, again, you'll come away with a better idea of what it actually is, and don't go into it with the wrong mindset, which I think is going to be the biggest drawback for many people. Questions always pop up on this is from the Discord. And again, I'm going to talk about this near the end, but if you're not on the ASL Discord, maybe you should. Lots of sub channels there, lots of ASL talk, and they actually have a sub channel for Solitaire, General SASL. So you can go there and post any kind of questions that you may have, and hopefully it can be answered. But you can see the kind of mindset that we're talking about. It really is a car manual, like Stu pointed out. It is a series of rules, much like chapters A through Z, and it's just one more bit of material that you have to ingest. And when you approach it from that mindset, you start to see, you don't see the beauty that might be contained therein, as I do it. And so that is one reason why I'm going to be producing this series of videos, is to help fill in the blanks for you so you can give it maybe a better try. Because as Mark Pikovich says, it plays really well as a solitaire game. And when Charlie Keebler designed the first edition of Solitaire ASL, it was a really fascinating game, like Mark says. I underlined and bolded the part where it is something that plays very differently than ASL, but at the same time, it shares some similarities with it. So it's kind of like a hybrid mashup. So with all that being said, what SASL isn't, it is not a replacement for face-to-face. You're never going to get the same kind of game as sitting across from a human opponent. It's just they can outthink the system, and the system is designed in such a way to enact most common routes for the enemy. However, again, the unconventional thinking of your opponent, you'll get a vastly different game. So you have to prepare yourself for that. You may actually become worse and face to face if you play a lot of solitaire, because it teaches you some tactics that you're going to get penalized for in face to face. Things like moving in stacks and gaming the system, because you're not going to be able to game your opponent, especially if he knows the rules better than you. What Delwood pointed out in his article from a lot of impressions he's getting is players think that it's a series of clunky automated formulas and not providing any fun. Again, I take the opposite view. I think it's immensely fun. I think it's very not clunky. Yes, you will produce some weird decisions because it's not a true AI, right? It's a series of tables that have been designed to replicate most common actions. However, sometimes you'll roll a result. For example, you'll take your enemy opponent and they want you to roll randomly at start, and he heads off in that direction to the limit of his move, which may be away from where all the action is. So when that kind of situation crops up, you look and say, well, that's not a very well thought out rule. But again, it cannot account for all situations. So you, as a player in that situation, may have to override the rules. Again, something that I think a lot of people forget that they are allowed to do. So all this to say, you cannot and probably should not be playing SASL like regular ASL. And on the same note, when it comes to ASL scenarios, these are proper scenarios, not the missions from SASL, but proper scenarios, not really intended for solo play. There's many attempts have been online. You can find instructions on how to do all that. Some successfully, some not. But again, once you start talking about scenarios with special rules like HIP, pre-registered hexes for artillery and bore sighting, etc., all that kind of information that you normally would not know, hidden fortifications is another one. Um, it's hard to replicate that seriously when you face those kinds of SSRs. One other thing SASL is not is a programmed instruction on how to play the game as well as play ASL. It's assumed that you have a good knowledge of the rules. As we said, it's just another laundry list of rules, much like a car manual that tells you how to do something. But it's up to you to infer from that rule set the information you need in order to carry out your actions. So what is SASL? SASL requires new tactics, new approaches, and a different mindset. Yes, we share the same maps, counters, and rules as face-to-face. However, we have extras thrown in, and this is typically where the AI comes in to deal with the enemy, and most importantly, the true fog of war. You do not know what that suspect counter is. It could be a tank, it could be an artillery piece, could be a crew, could just be nothing. You don't know until you attempt to activate it, whether or not your fire base that you set up to deal with whatever you activate turns out to be a mirage, and now you have to readjust your forces. Or you just think you're at the tail end of the mission, you've successfully captured all the VPOs, and then they roll a random event for the enemy, and it's a flanking force that comes in behind you and takes back all your VPOs. All that kind of stuff. It's true fog of war because with a normal ASL scenario, you can look at the orders of battle for both sides. You know what you're facing. You look at the terrain, you have a rough idea of where the setup's going to be, so you know how to attack it. And because you'll see your opponent's setup, you'll be able to respond accordingly. With SASL, again, you're going to see a field of counters in front of you. Sometimes they might be coming at you, sometimes they might be stationary, and you have to decide how you're going to deal with each situation differently. If you cobble a bunch of missions together, you have what's called a solitaire campaign, and in the back of the solitaire section, section 18, is a list of different campaign companies that have been pre-designed for you to use. Again, most of those have been designed after the first edition came out, before the second edition, and then incorporated in the latter. So again, it shows you the kind of community support that was out there just to fill in the gaps left by the system. Leadership is probably one of the most important things that you're going to face in solitaire, unlike in a normal scenario where you can move your units willy-nilly. In solitaire, everything is based on command influence, and this works for the opponent as well as for you. So your opponent suffers possible panic, as do you if you fail to roll your command die roll. So leaders are very important, and this forces you to stack. You want to take advantage of your highest rated leader so that he can influence all the leaders beneath him, as well as most of your company, because nothing sucks more than when you're trying to advance on board and your 10-3 panics, and he's left behind while the rest of your forces start to pick their way through to the board. It's happened to me many a time. Just when you think it's your reinforcements are going to come on time, you roll panic and they don't. So again, it's all part of the fog of war, and it really simulates, I think, combat in some cases better than normal ASL just because you in real life you don't really know what's going on. You don't have that omniscient view of what's going on. So some general concepts of solitaire, as we said, fog of war. Again, this is represented by the suspect counters, the random events that happen as part of the wind change rule, which could be friendly or disastrous depending how it is. Variable game length, which is when imported from historical ASL modules, where you don't know when the game's going to be over. Could be turn 10, could be turn 20. You don't know. It's based on the mission special rules and certain conditions that apply, and each mission is a little bit different than all the other ones. So again, you really don't know what you're going to face and for how long you're going to have to face it. Strategy, therefore, is squarely in your hands. So do you continue the attack? Are you setting yourself up for failure for the next mission, depending on what that is? Or again, risk versus reward. This is very typical in most SASL games, which may or may not be in regular face-to-face. Again, face-to-face is a slightly different beast. Yes, there is risk versus reward, but sometimes it's out of your hands. With solitaire, because you can really game the system, as we're going to see. You can set yourself up for success, and you could also push too far, inadvertently activating the wrong units, and suddenly you have some armored column when you only have as a couple of ATRs. So half squad scouting is going to be key to early activation. If you're in a defensive posture and you have advancing suspects, you're going to have some kind of advanced recce to activate those units as soon as possible. It just makes your life a lot easier. You know what's coming at you. And conversely, if you're on the advance and they're in the defense, you also want to activate their kill stacks prior to you moving your best leader with a couple squads in the open when you know that you probably shouldn't. Again, you use your scouts ahead of you, they identify where the enemy is, then you can defeat them in detail, which is the concept of isolated destruction, where you activate just enough that you can handle, you deal with it, and then you move on to the next. You also have to know when to cut and run. You have to know, have I gained enough victory points to call it a win in the course of a campaign, or should I push a little bit farther? Again, you don't know with variable game length and random events cropping up what could happen, but you do have to make those kinds of decisions. And sometimes you will have to retreat off the board if you want to save your company from annihilation. That is also a valid route. Yes, you'll lose the scenario, but at least you'll have your company. So some pitfalls that exist in the game, and again, you really can't avoid these ones. It's easy to game the system. Again, we said destroy in detail. You only activate what you can beat typically. If you look at the background image, you can see that's Valor of the Guards, and you can see all the black suspect counters that are just waiting there for me to get close to them and activate them. Once I reach certain conditions, then they will become active, and if I'm not ready, I could inadvertently activate something I'm not ready for, like again tanks when all I have is ATRs in that sector or something along those lines. So therefore your opponent in this case can be predictable. You can again game the system because you'll activate just enough that you can deal with and then move on while the rest of them just sit there and wait. There's going to be a lot to remember as well. Certain actions and roles you're going to forget and or fail to do. For example, if you're moving around a large urban environment and there's lots of units that you have to check for line of sight, if you inadvertently miss a couple that probably would have activated, they might even influence the battle. You can't typically go back and redo those. Again, you should try and avoid those whenever possible. Just try and be as thorough as possible. Give the enemy its own fighting chance. As a result, there's going to be some errors, and there's not going to be anyone to correct you when you make those errors. Another reason why the game is good is you can take the time to do a turn's worth of action, take a break, reassess what happened, maybe identify what you missed to do or what you failed to do, and then carry on from that point. That's one reason why it's not good for instructional purposes, because it's not a programmed instruction. It's just a set of rules for you to use, assuming you have knowledge of the rules already. So it's really not good for instructional purposes. It's good to keep your skills fresh because you can practice the rules. However, you will not learn from it. When it comes to random number generation, is a hairy beast. Either it likes you or it hates you. Sometimes both at the same time. For example, when you're rolling snake eyes for heat of battle and then you roll boxcars, that happens a lot to me for some reason. Or when a sniper moves around the field, you just know it's going to land on your kill stack and take out your 10-2. That's just the way it's going to be, even though there's plenty of options around it. So command and control is going to be great until it's not. Again, you're forced to stack because you want your best leaders to give you the best chance of being able to act. If you panic, you're basically immobile and not good order, and you're waiting for something to come and attack you. So you need to stack and or keep forces close to your leaders so that you can benefit from his leadership role. And eventually, SASL is going to lead to some very lopsided results. You can see here in this case, we have two cases from Val of the Guards, 14 September day and night. And you can see that the Germans in this case killed 210 CVP. The Russians only 74. Now, the Russians, in this case, I was playing the Germans. The Russians will replenish all their forces, unlike you, the German, who has to spend campaign purchase points, as per normal. So if you look at the nighttime mission where I killed a further 181, that would wipe out a significant number of face-to-face opponent counters, and obviously it's very unrealistic. So again, this is why it requires a different mindset, a different approach. You must be aware, especially in campaign games, that the enemy will always be able to replenish itself, and you might have to suffer through certain results. Finally, you're only cheating yourself if you deliberately break any of these rules. If you conveniently forget or redo an action, say for example you bring in an engineer squad with a flamethrower and a 9-1 up against the suspect and it activates as a 76 long artillery piece, you may want to retake that step. Really want to retake that step, but you really shouldn't. That was the price you paid for doing a recce with a leader and an engineer squad. And hopefully he breaks his gun or he doesn't KIA you. So let's talk about the goodness of SASL. So SASL is self-paced, as we said. It gives you plenty of time to think about your moves. You don't have any adversarial conduct or opponent to prod you on. You don't have to worry about a time constraint. Again, you can do a turn one day and come back in 3 days and carry on with the next turn, etc. There are 4 new mechanics that you must learn for the AI, and these deal with the suspect counters, including what kind of hold and advanced attitude they may be in, as well as how to activate them, which of course then leads to the activation tables and the action tables, all done by hierarchical lists. So if you look into detail at them, you'll be able to see that if this happens, do that. If not, then see this other rule, and so forth. And it goes with the same with the generation tables for the nationalities. Again, typically the A series of tables is for the AI, and this example of the German generation table would be for you, the player. However, you will have to use these tables to generate forces at times. There are also 2 other mechanics that you must know for general play, and that is the command control system and random events. Now, those last 2 work for both enemy and friendly forces. Slightly different on the command and control, but again, we're going to get into all that panic and command and control action die rolls probably in the next video. In the end, you can have long-term campaign play and you watch your friendly company improve as the war goes on. So if you want to play a German infantry company that goes into France in 40 and ends up in Stalingrad like I did, you can generate a multi-mission campaign. You can see all your 467s turn into 468s. Maybe some of them will die in the process, and you'll see your leaders advance up, and then they'll get sniped when you step into Stalingrad. All that kind of fun stuff that comes with a solitaire game. Again, it's really up to you how you want to approach it, but if you take that quasi role-playing attitude towards it, it can be very instructive. So where do we look next? There's a couple of forums out there. Game Squad and Board Game Geek are 2 that pop to mind. I'm a member of Game Squad, not so much Board Game Geek. I find that one a little bit hard to navigate around, but it's also very popular. In both locations, you can find lots of information on ASL. Game Squad has its own solitaire subforum where, again, questions are posted and or people's self-derived campaigns. or that kind of stuff, you can find all those nice juicy links in the download section or in those forums. There's also Discord, so if you're on the Advanced Squad Leader Discord, you'll see the general SAL or general SASL sub channel. If not, I highly recommend you get onto Discord. Again, it's you might find quicker answers than you will on Game Squad, and whilst people frequent both, you just may find a quicker resolution to your question on Discord. Finally, this multi-man publishing. Now, again, third edition, hopefully 2024. I do not see it appearing in December. I could see it definitely in 2024. But again, it depends on Multi-Man Publishing's production schedule. You can see a lot of their stuff has already been pushed to the right as it is. If you really want to delve into a good campaign, there's Valor of the Guards SASL rules from Tom Moran, the designer of Valor of the Guards. He posted them up on the MMP site. You can go to Support ASL and download the PDF. It's got its own generation tables, its own RE events, and its own activation tables for playing Valor of the Guards. And you can play all 4 campaign games as well. So if you really want to dive into it like I have, by all means go there. There's also Facebook. Now there's 2 groups. One's the SASL Players group with about 800 members. Then there's the Advanced Squad Leader, again, 7,000 members. And again, people frequent Discord, Game Squad forums, and the Facebook groups at the same time. So you may get duplication, but you might get a quicker resolution with Facebook if the first 2 don't really work out for you. Also in the SASL Players group, you find rules for the Red Barricades. Very much like the Valor of the Guards, written by Jorgen Holmquist. And again, if you want to tackle Red Barricades, that's your go-to. And you'll also find several other aids as well, including Bloody Reef Tarawa and what have you. Now, those last 2 campaigns, you see their Band of Brothers and Barbarossa. Those are written by Hans Mielens. And again, these are pre-second edition, but they're still usable. And very good historical campaigns. I've played the Barbarossa one at least twice. Band of Brothers, I think I've done that one once. But again, if you look online, you'll find plenty of resources. Again, YouTube, lots of videos, including this channel. And yeah, there's a lot of community support that came out after the first edition SASL rules hit the streets. Some of that was incorporated into the second edition. However, you'll still find plenty of information out there. Again, those 3 sources, Discord forums or Facebook. A lot of house rules, play aids, and again, historical campaigns, including on Game Squad. I have 2 of them myself. I'm starting a 3rd one. So the first one is a German infantry company, again from France through its destruction in Stalingrad, reincorporated in 43 until its destruction by the Allies in Italy. And the second one is a Canadian rifle company landing in Sicily and working its way up the boot to Ortona. And then finally, I'm working on a Fallschirmjäger along the Neva one. And that one's kind of been in limbo for a couple of years. So hopefully I'll get around to finishing it. But again, just hopefully some work that will excite you into making your own kind of historical campaigns. There's plenty out there. There's Poland. There's a Dutch company, I believe, Romanians. Again, if you want to find it, you probably can. And there we have the intro. Now, again, this is just a brief summary of what you can expect in the next forthcoming videos. I'm really going to dive into all these subsections in Chapter S. I'll probably start off first with the command panic rules, just because I think a lot of people have issue with that the most. But of course, I'm going to have to cover everything. So I'm still working on how I'm going to exactly do that. The sequence is going to be very important. I want to be short and concise in these videos. I don't want them to ramble on like I am now. And I have to pick the proper order that you guys are going to be able to benefit from. So I'm still working on that, and we'll see how that goes. But hopefully this has inspired you to look into Solitaire. Again, wait for the 3rd edition to hit the streets. Unless you're rich, you want to spend $200+ on used or Ziploc version. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. I'm not going to spend that myself. I'll wait. Yeah, so let's see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.